Namaskar. Welcome to our anti-trafficking series, Reality Check. A few weeks back, or rather 2 months back, on July 30th, on the World Day Against Trafficking in Persons, Salil and I had co-moderated a survivor-centered conversation on where we are going as an anti-trafficking brigade. A big feedback that came out from that webinar was uh, deeper engagement with experts and stakeholders in the sector to understand more deeply where we are, uh, where we are not doing or doing it all right. And that's where the idea of a reality check started. We felt that maybe it is high time for all of us to have a very deeper introspection on what we are doing, how we are doing, whether we are doing it rightly or not. Today is the first part of a 6-week series. Through this next 6 weeks, we will be meeting activists, we will be meeting Supreme Court judges, we will be meeting advocates, prosecutors, psychiatrists, and actually understanding where we are not doing it right. The aim of this entire series is not to criticize, but to introspect, and to look into our own selves to see where we are not doing it all right and what are the remedial measures that each one of us can take to do it. Today is the first part of the series, and today we have three amazing activists: Hasina Kharibhah, founder Impulse NGO Network; Ravikant, founder Shakti Vahini; Captain Vineet, founder Cyber Peace Foundation. Three amazing activists who have given a big part of their life fighting human trafficking, who have gone through the process of understanding failures, seeing some amount of success, established path-breaking interventions in their own regions. We will be talking to them and understanding, as a civil society organization, as collectively as a civil society group, what have we done and what have we not done, and where can we make the changes. But before we start, I would like to introduce my co-moderator, Salil Kadir, Cultural Affairs Officer from the US Consulate of Hyderabad, to give you a little understanding on the format of this series, and also a bit about the rules and regulations. Over to you, Salil.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Sunita. Once again, welcome to all the panelists. Welcome to all the viewers who are here. We have split our audiences basically into two. There are some who are present here in the Zoom platform, and there are hundreds of you who are watching us live at this point of time on Facebook too. So I have a few set of rules, house rules that are required for any good conversation, for any good dialogue to take place, because this is a two-way conversation. So the first thing that I would request anybody who is in the Zoom platform is to ensure that your audio and your video is muted. That is, it is absolutely critical that we stay on mute throughout. Do not switch on your cameras. It will interfere with the quality of this broadcast. It will also interfere with the process of this conversation. So it's my humble request to ensure that you stay on mute and keep your cameras off, except for our panelists. The second thing is about questions. I'm pretty sure since you're here and listening to all these experts who are going to broadly talk about some very important and critical issues that concern human trafficking in our country and the way it is managed and the solutions that we are looking for the challenges that we are facing. I am requesting you that if you have questions, if you're on Facebook, feel free to post your questions in the chat box that appears right below the screen on the Facebook chat. Also, those who are here in Zoom can post your questions in the chat box. We will not be able to take live audio questions, but I can assure you that all your questions are going to be picked up. And if those questions have not been responded to within the time frame of this dialogue, we will make sure that we address them on your behalf to the panelists. To the panelists, my request is we have limited time, and it's a world out there in terms of the responses that we are seeking from you. So in the best interest of time, my request to you would be to stick to about 2 to 3 minutes for your responses. We have a few questions for you, so if you could stick to that, it would basically mean that we are in a good position to cover everything that we have today for you, as well as take these questions from our audiences. And one final thing to the audiences, please make sure that you listen to the conversation before you start posting questions, because it is quite possible that several of the questions that you have in your minds may be addressed during the course of the conversation. So let our panelists speak for a little while and then start posting your questions. I think they will be more responsive, more to the point, to the comments being made by our panelists. Yeah. Over to you, Sunita.
Thank you, Salil. Thinking of questions, I just want to acknowledge the presence of Swasti Rana and Nitin from the Prajwala team, who are actually monitoring the questions and picking all the relevant questions from now onwards for the panelists, which will be given to Salil in the end of the conversation. So let's begin our conversation. And as Salil said, and we've been talking about this, that this is a very honest conversation. It's an introspection of our own work. I want to start with you, Hasina. We've been here for some time now, over 2 decades, and we understand a lot about human trafficking. But what are the recent trends that you feel extremely uncomfortable about in terms of human trafficking per se? What are the recent trends from your region which makes you feel uncomfortable, makes you feel worried?
Thank you so much, Sunita. I mean, it's lovely to be part of this reality check. And I think whatever I'm going to share today is mainly my personal journey in the process with all of you over the years. So it's going to be more of what I felt, what I've experienced, and what I've seen over the years. For me, what is very uncomfortable, Sunita, at the moment is that 20 years down the line, all of us has learned, unlearned, made mistake, seen how the scenario has changed, the challenges that has come way ahead of us. But what I'm comfortable is that I see more new organization coming up where the knowledge is actually very, very limited of what has happened in the past, and what is being brought forward at the moment, it's what we have done 20 years ago. So that is very uncomfortable, because all of us in this panel today have spent more than 20 years plus in our journey to address human trafficking. And if that is going to be reinvented again without value of what has already been done by many of us, then I find it that very uncomfortable, because the resources get scattered when the resources are limited, and the way forward will have no meaning if we don't take the learning lesson of the past. I'm not saying that I'm against new organization. I am not saying that we should not have younger organization. I believe, I mean, to the core of my heart, that young people should come forward, young leadership should come forward, more organization should be proactive. But there is a way when we talk about being proactive. We need to validate the information that has been all the way in the past, a learning lesson. That learning lesson cannot be isolated from how we go forward. So that's very uncomfortable when I see organization doing and speaking things we have spoken 20 years ago. That's not a solution. There has to be a learning of, the organization who've spent years and years and years, and new organization where we can actually learn and then, transform the meaning of addressing human trafficking.
Thank you, Hasina. You spoke about reinventing the wheel again and again, and that is making you feel very uncomfortable. Let me go to Ravi. Ravi, I want to focus on just the human trafficking, not so much about the civil society response, but in the domain of human trafficking, the way human beings are being bought and sold. Is there any trend in the human trafficking space, the way the traffickers, the organized criminals are functioning? Is there something that is worrisome of today's time? Ravi, the question is to you.
Yeah, thank you for this opportunity, Sunita ji. And really new trends are emerging. Whatever we have done for so many years, it has been changing now. We are seeing the recent trends which are coming in. Red light areas are diminishing completely when we talk about sex trafficking due to the good work done by all of us together. There has been a reduction of trafficking from Nepal and Bangladesh. That is also on record because trafficking from Nepal has gone to other places, and India, there has been a lot of reduction. A lot of these online things are coming up. It's completely becoming very technical, very cyber related, and traffickers have learned all the new things. So traditional forms of combating human trafficking, we have to look into that, and we have to see that we learn all the new skills, especially in terms of online issues. They are now recruiting individuals through social media and online techniques. They are supplying through online techniques, through website. Soliciting is being done through website and WhatsApp. So these are new trends which we have to really look into and to understand and to calibrate our responses before we, and certainly this COVID-19 situation, this has really had a big impact on issues going online. Traffickers now have multiplied their efforts and they have become very technical. That's the new trends we are seeing. Most of them are now running the sex trade and through spas, massage parlors and services across the city. And that's the new trends which makes me uncomfortable, because we have to learn all the new skills. And a lot of young people are being exploited. They are being approached through online issues, and our responses have to be calibrated like that. And also the government responses, we have to bring the government on this whole issue.
Ravi, you spoke about the new trends, and that makes me really think, because so what was there 20 years back is not there now. So things are changing. So what we tried out maybe 20 years back may not work today. So that we have to evolve new responses with the new trends is something that I'm getting from what you are saying. Vineet, let me come to you. Ravi mentioned also already cyber issues, and that is the new trend. It has been there for the last 5 or 6 years, but definitely COVID-19 has exploded the cyber trafficking scenario. But while the virtual conferences, the webinars, and everybody is talking about cyber trafficking, and in fact, practically every webinar that I have seen, somebody is talking about cyber trafficking. But when you look at the rescue and that domain of intervening, there is not many cases of cyber trafficking that one is actually dealing with on a regular basis, other than the few people here and there. So is cyber trafficking a myth that all of us are creating right now? Is it just something that is being discussed on virtual space, or is it real? And how real is that, and how big that danger is? Vineet, to you.
Yes, Sunita ji, first of all, thank you for getting me here. And again, I'll take up from where Ravi ji left, is the cyberspace and the online mediums being one of the major platforms. While this is really a good news that trafficking in certain areas are reducing, but what I genuinely feel, and this is something that we have come through research, is there's a lot of increase in the trafficking which is happening in the cyberspace. And this is happening because there are a number of challenges now at this moment. First of all, cyberspace does not have a boundary. And this is one major concern because for example, if trafficking happens and there are two countries involved, if the government, for example, why the response systems also are slow is because if the government sends a request for data to some other country, that process is very long and it takes on an average 6 months for the government to get the data from a foreign country or via the Interpol. So that is one big challenge that I see here. And also the emerging platforms. There are a lot of time. It's not just Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram today. It's probably a number of platforms which are cropping up, and every day, in fact, we come across some new platform where some or the other incidents and trafficking is happening. There's a complete shift. If we talk about COVID-19, we are already shifting to the new norm, and work from home, the online schooling has become the new norm, where everything, each and every activity is happening through cyberspace. Here, in fact, the trafficker also feel that they can be anonymous, sitting in one corner of the country or maybe some other country, they can easily get access to the victims. And plus, in fact, for them to recruit people who can do the job has also made easy. The entire capacity building is also happening online. And we have done investigation around different platforms. In fact, there are certain platforms which are offering group invites. Now we see these group invites are being used again by the traffickers to actually promote trafficking. And also the dark web has again become one big challenge, where a lot of such platforms are there where traffickers make good use of the platform. So there is a complete shift. According to us, there is a steep rise. I'll not say normal rise, but there is a steep rise in the number of trafficking cases which are happening through the cyberspace.
Thank you. Thank you all for responding to the first set of questions, which has pretty much set the agenda in terms of trends that have come up. You know, it was very interesting to hear Vineet finally speak about the cyber trafficking and issues in the cyberspace, which have exploded. But Hasina, you mentioned a trend where newer organizations are coming up. That is a very natural thing, where the scale of the problem is such that they require more and more organizations to deal with these issues. But what we are also seeing is that several of these organizations are not really equipped to deal with the issue. Organizations like the civil society organizations that you all represent have tremendous experience. But how would you respond to the question of the lack of skills in several of these newer organizations? And I would say, as a civil society, as a unified civil society response, how would you all respond to these newer organizations that are coming into the field?
Thank you, Sahil. The main part for me is that organizations who have been in the sector of anti-trafficking has actually learned over time, because human trafficking is very complex. The resources to address human trafficking is also very limited. Many of the efforts in the country has worked because it has been a very collective response. I mean, if I use the word collective response, I am based in the northeast of India. I work in 8 states. It would have been possible to do rescue operation in Hyderabad if Sunita and Prajwala is not there. I mean, that's what I'm trying to say. It's a collective, where the respect of mutual responses, because the goal is to end human trafficking. Now, that has been how it has grown. Many stakeholders has come together. We have tried to look for solution, but we also had to build our own organization team in terms of understanding the gravity, the problems, ensuring that the survivor who we are actually focusing is not, his or her right is not going to be violated. So the question now is, when we talk about less resources, we are talking about mushrooming of organization, where the skill set is still something which is the most important part of it. And we also hear the other speaker saying now is that the online issue. Now, unless until we all join a collective of organizations who spend years and years of our time in addressing this issue, we will not be able to give a response to human trafficking efficiently. Now, new trends, we ourselves as organization are been in the space for 20 years. Now we are learning new trends. New trends has to be learned together. It has to be exchanged. It has to be collaborated. But what I see in new organization is that because of the small funding which is available in the market, they have fractioned the whole thing, you know, rather than coming together. That is what the challenge is. Unless until the respect of senior organization who have been in the field, that we need to work together. We need to come in as a collective. We need to exchange our resources, exchange our ideas and skill. We are actually dividing, you know, two group of organization rather than looking for a solution. So that is the biggest challenge. Unless until we all drop our ego, come together and say, we are not threatened by senior organization who have been there for 20 years or 30 years, but we need to work together with them. We need to make these resources, you know, engage in a collective manner. New trends cannot be addressed. We'll just keep.
Thanks, Hasina. Maybe we were having a little bit of a connection issue in the Northeast where she is. Internet can always be a problem. I'm sitting here in Hyderabad and I might have a problem. So, you know, this is a universal problem, but some very relevant points on funding and sharing of resources, which we will come back to a little later during this conversation. But Hasina, thank you for raising some of these issues where you have brought together people. And a very good example that you gave of how you have worked with organizations like Prajwala here. These are networks that go. But Raviji, I will come to you on this issue of newer organizations. Because of the pandemic, what we've noticed is that a lot of activity has moved into the cyberspace. You know, these conversations like the ones that we are having, I see so many of these happening. But when it comes to on-ground rescue and rehabilitation, we see only the same faces. Whereas online, you may see a lot of other organizations, newer trends that Hasina referred to. So what do you think is the civil society response in this area? It's actually on ground. You know, how can you expand this collective and have more people get involved on ground?
Okay, so thank you, Hasina, for opening up this issue. And I do a lot of training with the law enforcement agencies. And everywhere I go, I don't talk about Shakti Vahini. I talk about Childline, because we have to understand that Childline is the government response to these issues. Every district now has about a Childline, which has about 7 to 8 staff who are trained on child rights issues. So, and Childline India Foundation also talks about this. So there will be 526 Childlines across the country. So, and they are easily available everywhere. So we have to see what the government is doing. And that is where, so now these 526 Childlines are being run by 526 NGOs. So we have to do trainings for them. We have to support them. We have to technically make them, equip them. So I think that the government should step in and ensure, and that's what the Childline India Foundation, because my own experience in any district you go, and wherever cases where we have intervened, the first help we ask is from the Childline India Foundation people. They are always there. They are readily available and they are local people and they provide the support. So it's good that newer organizations are coming in. It's most welcome. The problem is huge. But of course, the technical capacity, technical skills are required. And that is where they need support. And that is where the government as well as various civil society organizations should come and support. The problem is not on the newer organization. I will go a step further where Hasina has gone. The problem is that, you know, donor agencies are coming in from abroad and other countries, and you know, they are forming, they are driving the discourse because they have the funds. You know, in the last 3 years, there is a huge amount of funding coming in for human trafficking, but there's nothing happening on the ground, going in and seeing it. Of course, there are well-reputed organizations, they are working. My take is that if any donor organization who comes to work in this country, they should plan their programs according to the national action of plan or what the government is thinking. I know that I speak to a lot of government officers and, the Ministry of Home Affairs, MWCD, they are not aware of the various initiatives which are working. They don't see the program documents. They don't see what is the action plan. They are just only invited into the programs. So that has to change. The government has to be brought into board. And then once we have the government on board, and my own experience of 20 years, until and unless we don't have the government on board and properly, and there are a lot of good people. I know Sunita ji does very close networking with government officers. They are open, they want to do work, and therefore we have to bring them on board and tell them what we are doing. That is important. Any agency, any major funding which comes in, the government should know that this is the initiative which is, and therefore therefore they can calibrate the efforts. So my take is not the upcoming civil society organization. My problem is from the donor agencies who are running their own agendas, and that is the problem.
Thanks, Raviji. I think you're all already raising issues that we were thinking of bringing into these conversations. Hasina spoke about how we should drop our egos. I think that's a great approach that disarms some of the newer organizations who may not necessarily be wanting to reach out to bigger organizations like the ones that you run. And very importantly, again, on issues of donors and agendas, we'll come back to that a little later in this conversation. Vineet, I want to come to you. You mentioned something very relevant, and it is during the pandemic that we've all seen that the issue of the dark web has clearly blown up. There are people who are readily available, and I say in quotes, readily available to be trafficked, and the traffickers also know where they are. But there are very few organizations that we know of who are actually working in this space, except probably Aram that I've heard of and read about. And so there is a very large gap when we're talking about cyber trafficking. There's a very large gap in the civil society response. How do you respond to that?
Yes, there is definitely a large gap, and again, I'll take it on from Raviji. One point, like he mentioned about Childline. So for us also, as Cyber Peace Foundation also, whatever request we get, we also collaborate with entities like Childline and other non-profits who are working in this space. Because one major problem that I see, why don't we see the NCRB statistics mentioning the number of cases going up, is because major crimes, in fact, majority of the reporting doesn't happen. Majority of the cases are unreported. People don't report it. They look forward for our help. They reach out to us and they want us to handle cases unofficially. So in such a scenario, it becomes very difficult for us also to get government help. Like I'll again mention, in fact, NCRB, and there are institutions, government institutions who are open. There are good people in the system who are ready to help, but they are stuck because we can't file a case online. In fact, the victim is not comfortable filing such cases. So there are multiple issues. And what I feel is, again, we need more capacity to be built in this particular area. There is not much know-how. When you talk about cyberspace, like I mentioned, there are a number of platforms there, plus new tech emerging. So it's very difficult for an organization to keep a tab on what's happening in the cyberspace, what kind of technologies are coming in and going. Also, end-to-end encryption. So there's a myth about end-to-end encryption also, that it is bad. But we see the other side, that in fact it protects the privacy of the individual also. But sometimes there are certain things like the group invites is one such thing, where a lot of these criminals make use of the network, plus also the new form of payments. I would say e-wallets, also the cryptocurrencies. These are all anonymous payments where all these trafficking happens. So any organization, I would say any non-tech civil society organization working in the trafficking space would find very difficult to investigate a particular crime that is happening through the cyberspace. At times in fact we also get stuck in some cases. So it is something that will take time. The solution would not come easy. There are a number of solutions available at this point of time, but still research is the way forward and collaboration is the way forward. So that's what I wanted to share.
Salil, at least twice, thrice, I felt I shouldn't have been a moderator. I should have been one of the panelists.
I can assure you, Sunita, if you give me an offer, I will bring these three as the moderators, and we will pose questions to you. So then you can respond to all these.
I would love that. But you know, what I'm hearing from Hasina, Salil, Hasina, Ravi, and Vineet are two, three things. There's a huge gap in terms of civil society responses, in terms of synergy of resources, synergy of skills. And, you know, there is a huge gap of frontliners too, because of the synergy, because we are unable to converge all our strengths. And Ravi rightly pointed out that the government system, whether it is Childline or the ICPS, is also a huge resource, which is not getting adequately synergized with the movement, which will then become very, very strong. But also, I think Vineet raised a point, which again, I think Hasina said it in a different way, is lack of skilled frontliners. You know, like we have many people now talking about prevention, many people conducting webinars and national symposiums on virtual space, but actually very, very few doing the rescue work, fewer even to do take care of the victims and provide survivors some you know, options. So at the frontline level, we do lack a lot of skilled teams, and that is something that has come out very clearly in the previous question. But something else also came out very, very strongly, that is about resources. Hasina,
Sunita ji, you have got muted.
Hasina, I wanted to ask you this. You know, there's so many donors, and all of you all spoke about donors, big donors coming. They come with a project, they provide grants, and everybody is bidding for it. The best man wins, they get a stuff. So it's kind of a competition of resources. The project cycle is over, the donor moves away, the problem is still there, resolved, unresolved, it is still there. Then it's left to the civil society organization whether they want to sustain the response or not. Somewhere we are becoming project based, somewhere we are becoming grant based. Very, very few organizations are equipped to deal with needs on the ground. So what is it happening now? Are the needs on the ground actually dealt with, or is it only the donor perspective that is getting gratified right now? Is it only the donor driven agendas that is happening now, or are the issues and the needs on the ground that is getting tackled now? Where are the resources going?
You know, Sunita, I mean, Impulse today, I mean, is 30 years. And when I look, I said, oh my God, 30 years has passed. And here we are still talking about addressing human trafficking. We did come up with a model that actually emerged out of a collective partnership, collaboration of all the partners across the country. And that's how we succeeded, being based in a very remote area of the Northeast. Now, for us as an organization, the experiences that we have always worked so hard not to be donor driven, which become very challenging over the years. Donor has a set of agenda. Donor wants us to do sometimes the same thing 10 times when actually the need is somewhere else. That has been one experiences. But as a model, we have managed to actually bring collective source and groups of donors in the past. And I think most of them has been donors who have been supporting us all in many, many ways as well. But new trends, Sunita, is that we have realized that prevention, you know, it's an important element. There are two kinds of prevention. What you are doing at Prajwala, the rehabilitation is a prevention by itself to ensure that they don't get re-trafficked. The prevention that we are doing at the source is ensuring that economic and livelihood becomes a source of, you know, support so that they can choose not to migrate unsafely. In that space, we don't see donors coming forward. They are not interested. What they're interested is how many webinars you're going to do, how many events you're going to do, how many more program can get out there, how many social media tweets and followers and others. There's so much money out there, but the ground is completely very different. That is what I see. Now I see donors splitting these amount in regions, and it's like, you break the whole chain of the hard work being put by many organizations. So when I say break the chain, is that if they value the learning lessons, the innovation of many organizations, the need and where the resources has to be put, then what happens, Sunita, is we see a better response in a collective manner. But when we see donors coming in a country with an agenda to split or break, the whole process of how organization has evolved, and rather focusing the resources on the right direction, you're focusing resources. And I think Sahil mentioned very clearly, I mean, in one of in the beginning, that if you look at all of us, I don't think we are in the social media 24 hours 7. We don't have time for that. I mean, money don't come for people who don't do that 24 hours 7, because there's so much out there to be done. So that's one thing that we really need, and it's high time that organizations like us come together. I think we need to have dialogue with donors. We need to bring the government to actually support organizations who have been in this field for many years, that resources has to be distributed or resources has to be channelized in the region, in the area, in the need that is important, rather than putting resources and need because of specific agenda or specific processes, which might not help to actually address human trafficking the way we need to address, or we need to end this crime issue. So we really need to look at that. And I'm seeing that openly. I'm seeing that everywhere. There's my region. I'm seeing it in many regions of India. I mean, it's amazing that, like thousands and thousands of money, dollars is being spent on activity, which we know will never work because the need is somewhere else.
Ravi, somebody has switched on their audio. Please switch it off. Ravi, one of the things that I have noticed, and I'm sure you've noticed too, sometimes a big rescue happens and everybody talks about it. It's all on the newspaper, everywhere it is on social media. Everybody is doing Gangaho. It also kind of puts a spots on that region. Okay, this is where the big rescue happened, or this is where, so all the girls or all the children are from Odisha or some other place. And then a perception raises that this is the state where all the problem is there. And then all the donors are running towards that state because that is where all the problems are. And all of us know that rescues and especially rescuing of person is not actually an indication of the extent of the problem, because it could be also because of good policing. It could be also about proactive policing and proactive and law enforcers in that particular region. But somehow the fact that they did that much of proactive work ends up in giving a badnaam name, in terms of they get defamed that, all the trafficking is happening in Telangana and Andhra Pradesh, or all the trafficking is happening in Jharkhand. Because of which the donors also then start looking at these regions as the real only places where trafficking happens. And therefore, all resources go to that place. Do you think that resources are not evenly divided among actually genuine areas where the resources has to be put in? And what do you think is the kind of budget commitment from the government for this issue?
Yes, certainly that's a big issue in terms of allocation of resources on these issues. I think donors, mostly, there are two types of donors. There are institutional donors and there are international NGOs. The problem is with international NGOs, institutional donors, mostly government donors and UN donors, they understand these issues because they have been dealing it for a very long period of time. So they know what best to do. My take is that certainly we have, see, since there has been no national level study after the NHRC study in 2004, we still don't have the numbers of trafficking happening, the trends which are coming out, whatever things we have on paper are all NGO trends. But there should be a national level study and data which the government should do actually. And we have been telling the government also to have it, is to have this study and to have an understanding of the whole issue. Otherwise it will be, whatever everyone is thinking, whoever has the funds, who decides, and they go forward and do the implementation. So one of the issues is that the government has to undertake a national level study on this very huge problem which is there. And since it's now expanding into cyber issues, the government has to step in. The other issue which is very important is that that NGOs who have been working in this field, and trafficking, working on human trafficking requires a certain set of skills and set of understanding of the issue. Until and unless that is not there, the responses become very weak. And since we work with victims a lot, victims have to be handholded for a long period of time, and to fight the case, to get justice in that case, to fight for a compensation, to get everything. It's a long process. So we have to see, always we have to have a long-term strategy when allocation of resources are happening. And we should have a basic understanding of the current emerging trends. One of the issues is that suppose the government is not doing that national level research, which has been wanting for a long period of time, at least organizations should come together and let us do this research and have the government on board and come out with certain areas so that, we have one national level document. Presently, what is happening is any donor who's wanting to come does a research which is just very preliminary. I've seen many of these researches which are happening, which are very preliminary in nature, and they don't have the whole understanding of the issue. And on the basis of that research, they start doing the implementation of the program, which is actually very wrong. We should have a national level study, and people who have to want to come in, they are most welcome. Resources are needed, and they should work according to what the new trends are, which has been decided by the organizations or the government.
I think more and more as I listen to you, Ravi and Hasina, I feel there's a need for a national platform where all resources can be converged so that allocation to all the right areas can happen, accreditation, skill building, and everything to be, coming to one space so that things, at least we know how much is it that we are doing. But coming to Vineet, Ravi, I'll come back to you. Ravi, do you want to say something?
Yes, I just have an example. The West Bengal has very good policing in terms of combating human trafficking. That's why a lot of cases, they register every case. The West Bengal government came out with a state action plan to combat human trafficking. Andhra Pradesh also has one, and other states also has, but West Bengal came out 3 years ago. But most of the projects which are being run by donor agencies, they are not even looking into what the state government is saying. And therefore, we need to bring the state government and the central government into all these projects, because it's a law enforcement response. It has to be supported by the government.
So there's a huge need for convergence of resources, whether it is state partners or non-state partners, and that is not happening here. They're all working in silos, and we need to find a space that all the resources can be converged. Coming to you, Vineet, Ravi spoke extensively about the need for a research, and I do think that research is important, but it's also a reality that while we are researching and doing all those wonderful things, a whole lot of people are getting trafficked. And especially cyberspace. I think so much of research is being done about cyber trafficking, and everybody, like just few days back, I got at least five requests from 5 different corners of the state, from the country saying, we're doing a study on online child sexual abuse material, and can you help us, and things like that. What do you think, simultaneously, when people are getting trafficked, there is a whole world of people who are getting trapped and, uh, into slavery every minute as we talk. Does research alone help us, or simultaneously, uh, should we be doing more in terms of building capacities to support victims, especially from the cyber trafficking space where so much is happening and yet there are so few victims in our hand?
Right. So, Sunita ji, again, research, like you mentioned, okay, you got requests from 5 different people from across the country. So again, it's again the reinvention of the same wheel. Ideally, what we need is one big research which covers across maybe a complete landscape study of what's happening here in India in terms of trafficking and also child sexual abuse materials, different kinds of cases. So this is what we need, and what we are missing out at this point of time is a rehab for the victims, cyber victims. There might be a rehab for, normal trafficking victims, but what about people who get trafficked in the cyberspace? Is there any kind of a setup available where we can actually take them along and have some counseling done? And second thing is the first response. As of now, what I feel that we don't have a first response mechanism.
Absolutely.
If a victim wants to reach out, there's no such thing. What we have is the cybercrime.gov.in portal, thanks to you again, within a National Crime Records Bureau. And there are few state agencies who are proactive. For example, I would mention about Kerala Police. They have something called a cyber dome, and they've been carrying out various operations in the cyberspace. But if you talk about certain other police, maybe in Eastern India or the West, I find very few police on the law enforcement agencies who are active, who understand the subject enough. So I clearly see awareness being one thing. Like, people should understand cybercrime is different. This is different. So cybercrime, financial fraud is different, and online trafficking is different. Online sexual abuse is different. CSAM is different. We are still, in fact, if you talk about terminologies, there's still a lot of confusion between child pornography and child sexual abuse materials. So I see one is, first, we need to create a kind of a standard SOP. We need to set up first response for the victims, because victims want to reach out, but they don't have a platform where they can go seek help and then the solution get addressed. So we need to, as an organization together, like it was suggested by Hasina ji, Ravikant ji, and also suggested by you, is we need to come together. We need to have people again from different domains and also experts from the cyber domain who understand the subject well, who understand different platforms well, who understand different terminologies, dark web, how do the investigations happen. And also we can create a kind of a repository to train, whether it is law enforcement agencies, to train them on how do you investigate such kind of crimes. And also the end users, talking about the end user also, the end user also needs to be aware that this is where you go, this is what you do. So this is something which is missing in India, which is a gap, which I am very sure in times to come, again, this dialogue is quite relevant, that we are discussing these things. This should be something which should be our next step, that we should come together and establish something like this.
Thank you. On my screen, you're all visible right now. For me, you are collaborators. You're all collaborators, and working for the US government, I see you as partners, because I know all 4 of you have gone on the US government's international visitor leadership program. So for me, I don't see competition here. I see only collaboration. But the question that I have is on this competition versus collaboration issue. And Hasina, I'll ask you. We are all. Are we really competing to end trafficking? Or are we competing to grab resources? You mentioned about donor-driven agendas. We discussed that. Where do you see actual collaboration coming from? Or are we only competing amongst ourselves within the civil society world?
Well, thank you for that. First and foremost, I think IVLP has taught us to be together, has taught us to collaborate. And I think each one of us has gone in different time and learned many new things from the US. And I think US State Department has been very instrumental in helping most of us sitting in this panel today, to take our different innovation at different levels. And over the years, each one of us sitting in this panel and some more who are not in this panel today, through the US State Department, we have emerged to collaborate. We have emerged to work together. Yes, the UN agencies has come along with it to strengthen these processes. Now, the question comes back, Sahil, here is that beside us, the population of India is huge. Cross-border human trafficking is massive. And we are a pool of, some of us, I think, are also going through what we call it a journey where we are getting exhausting sometimes. It's too much, it's coming too much. The problem is out there so much. There's so much things to be done and much more to be done. Now, the question of competition here only emerge when you have donors specifically entering a country or a region with a focus of ensuring the funds being sent through, like what Ravi said, international NGOs. You have NGO like us, then you have international NGO who are in different locations of the world. Then you have the whole sector around that, and everybody is raising funds. I think COVID has made it much more difficult because it's a fatigue of donors, giving funds to different countries. And on top of that, the fund that is coming is not focusing on the problem. So what happened when you break these funds? Like, let's say you have just a preliminary mathematics, you give 5 lakhs of rupees and you divide 5 lakhs to 5 new organizations, you will not see a solution that is going to help in addressing human trafficking. But if you get 5 lakhs to an organization who have a past experience, who have already sustained, who have already seen, that 5 lakh can be incorporated on the emergent needs, whether it's a rescue, whether it's a rehabilitation, whether it's an integration. So that is where the whole fraction of resources is getting diverted. So my point here is diversion in such a way in the maths of how the money gets, fragmented, can be a dangerous way of addressing issues. But if they would have come together and say, what is the need of a country? How can we pool this together? Or there's a channel, what Sunita said, if you have, we call it a task force, we call it a convergence agency at the central, where there is like a notification of organization that resources should go here, here, and here. We need a research, no doubt about it, because we need to have very constructive research, not just mapping exercise. So that is where the competition comes. Because somebody who's just starting out, 1 lakh means a lot of money, and then, but for somebody who's been in this space for a long time, when you divide 5 lakhs into 5 groups, it just disperses the money, like, going and having pani puri out there, So we need to really understand that slavery cannot be addressed like that. It has to be addressed with a very thought-oriented experiences and background. But if you look back, US State Department initiative in the past has really helped us to go to the next level, Sahil. We are here today because of that. And we are here today beyond IVLP is the resources that we have worked in different regions and grew and collaborate. But that is not happening right now. So that is where the challenge lies.
Thanks, Hasina. Thanks for acknowledging, the role that the state IVLP has played in bringing you all together. But then, Raviji, my next question, is segueing from what Hasina actually said, is about networks. We see that there are lots of networks, lots of organizations, civil society organizations have come into networks. But those networks, if I can say, are networks within themselves. And they are all driven by certain, maybe sometimes faith purposes, or others are not having objection to that. But are these networks, as they are created, only for themselves, or is it really leading to networking within the larger civil society organizations that are working in the area of human trafficking?
It's a difficult question, actually. It's very difficult question, but Yes,
That was the intention, Raviji. I told you right at the very beginning, we will ask you difficult questions, but we know you have the answers.
yes, certainly. But I think networks should happen. Networking should happen, and network should exist, because we should be, when we talk to the government realizes that this is a group of organization, and therefore they listen to you. So when we talk about advocacy issues, when we talk about speaking to the government, when we are talking about policy changes, when we are talking about legislative changes, networks are important, because the government listens to numbers, because and that is where it is required. But certainly we are not seeing a big growth in the network between NGOs, because we are a divided lot. We don't come, and we are donor driven, we are divided lot, and we don't come together on certain issues together. So I think that we are all working on isolation, and we really need to come together. That's and that can only happen when we are committed to the cause, not to the not to the agencies for which we are working. We have to be committed to the cause. We see a big gap in terms of investigations. We see a big gap in terms of law enforcement responses. We see a big gap in rehabilitation. Just imagine that, what is a GOI's response to rehabilitation? If you see that, it's completely lacking. But there are people who want to work in the government. And therefore, when we come as an organ, as a network together, and we have seen a lot of good things which have happened. We got the POXO law, we got several new legislations. Networks have resulted into new legislations and other issues. But I think that we really need to, there's a big gap, and we have to come together and we have to work together. How it is going to happen is a big question, but certainly people like us are responsible for that. We are responsible. It's a collective responsibility. And if networks are not happening and we are not advocating collectively together, then it's failure on our parts.
Thank you, Raviji. That was very candid, I must say, of you to accept that there are challenges, and this is exactly how bridges are going to be built. This is exactly how we are going to get past this challenge, by acknowledging that there are loopholes, there are gaps, and they need to be bridged. Vineet, I'll come to you. We've been talking about networks. The moment we talk about cyberspace, the first thought that comes in our minds is network. But someone like you who is dealing with issues in the cyberspace, you're dealing with issues of cyber trafficking. What kind of collaboration are you seeing? Do you see that there is a network that is there either within organizations that are working in the area of combating cyber trafficking, or the online to offline, your own collaboration with networks like the civil society organizations that Raviji, Hasina, and Sunita represent? How is that network coming about? What are those challenges?
Well, network is there, in fact, but I would say it's in the very initial stages. So we are building it up. The challenge that we see here is there are many non-cyber organizations who are trying to come into this space with almost zero expertise there. But since everything is happening here, they're trying to build capabilities, but they don't realize that they need to collaborate with an organization which is already into this. So this is one thing why the next network is not expanding. And I would say it's mostly the international. We try to reach out to some of the international NGOs also for collaboration, but they were not so much receptive as what I felt, and they felt that we would be able to do it. So that was one challenge that I saw. The other thing is, again, there are issues when you talk about networking and also information sharing, because crimes that happen through the cyberspace, it needs immediate response. And as I highlighted right in the beginning, that it takes on an average 5 months for the law enforcement to get data. So the network between the law enforcement is also probably running a little slow. It's there. Interpol is there. And in certain cases related to child, if the case is related to child, what I have heard is the response is pretty quick, but still it takes around a day's time to get the response. But if it is a case which is dealing with adult, then it takes the normal route. And by the time the data comes it is already very late. And in fact, it is very difficult to give the relief to the victim also. If you talk about the laws also, the cyber laws, in fact, the law which is here in India is different from the law which is there in US. So the crime, a crime that happens in here in India may not be a crime in the other country. So there are a lot of issues here which actually needs a lot of discussions and deliberation, the need for international law, the need for information sharing. Then we talk about MLAT and different, I think we should do away with MLAT. We should have something where actually information sharing works. Going to the MLAT route, I don't see, whatever my limited, in fact, understanding and in fact interaction, because I do a lot of interaction with the state police, with different state police in India. And what I've come across, everybody comes to us and says, Ki hame to data, we are not getting the data from the other country, or maybe from the Interpol. So that is one challenge that I see here. So this is where the network needs to be built. Then the network, again, quick response, like I mentioned, is required. And also the network within the NGOs, again, needs to be built. By the time the data comes, what about the victim relief? And what about the rehab? The first response is where we should again team up and again give the relief to the victim.
Sunita, you're muted.
What I'm seeing right now is scarcity in the midst of plenty. We seem to be having plenty of organization now, at least on name, on paper, virtually, offline, online, everywhere. But there is definitely a scarcity of skilled organizations. There's a huge scarcity of organizations who are providing direct services to victims. There's a huge scarcity of organizations that is providing post-rescue care to victims, supporting the criminal justice system for conviction. So all those spaces are, very, very thing. And those are also the spaces which are difficult. Those are also the spaces which comes in direct contact with the traffickers. It makes your life risky. You could be killed. I mean, Hasina had one of the worst kind of attacks on her life when, she went through a huge car accident, deliberate car accident. So all of us have gone through such physical attacks because we are at the front line taking on the traffickers by the thing. So it at one end, it for me as a frontliner doing what we are doing for the last 25 years. In fact, Prajwala is completing 25 years this year. I sometimes feel very challenged at the end of the day when we are the only few ones who are directly providing, direct services, protection services, rehabilitation services, rescue support. And now with what Vineet is saying, there's no frontliners available to provide first response system. They all want to get into the technology space where they are not even skilled in technology, where they can actually provide the first response space or the rehab support or the counseling support for victims who are coming from these forms of trafficking. But I don't want to become pessimistic. I don't want to, go with this feeling there is nothing happening. I believe there is hope. And I believe there is, small rays of hope that opens up. And I want to now talk about solutions. So Hasina, my first question to you. What do you think are the 3 concrete things that we nationally should be doing from the prevention perspective? 3 very concrete things together as civil society, as a collective force.
From the prevention part, I think the 3 topmost is that prevent re-trafficking. To prevent re-trafficking, it's important that institution like yours, Sunita, needs to be replicated in large scale, so that beside being in a shelter, they also have marketable skill when they go back, and you are preventing them from re-trafficking. Number 2 is prevention. I know awareness is important. It's an ongoing. I mean, we need to evolve in the awareness building, definitely, because trends is challenging, problems is challenging. I think Vineet mentioned about the cyber thing. I mean, people have to know what kind of cyber trafficking is happening. I mean, we have to be upgrading ourselves. So prevention has to come along with good knowledge, good understanding. Then only we'll be able to tackle upgrading ourselves and learning it collectively. The other most important prevention is we need to look at economics. Economic sustainability of source area, where the trend of migration is increasing, inbound migration is increasing. If you're looking at COVID and lockdown right now, like we as an organization ourselves realized that years ago. So we put our heart and soul into social enterprises, where we believe that area where people are moving widely, area where people are actually not having economic, we need to upgrade with marketable skill, market linkages, so that you indirectly giving women choice not to migrate unsafely. So it's very important. But then that also needs a circle skill set. I cannot do what you do, Sunita. I mean, let's just be honest. I mean, we send most of the girls to you. I mean, from the Northeast, staying with you, and then by the time they come back, you know the crisis that we face at the end of the day. I mean, we are like channeling and battling ourselves. But the skill set that I would say personally from our learning, being in the Northeast with tribal population, indigenous population, today we are even going beyond just weaving and textile and market and access, in a collective of all the artisans, because that's our strength. We are importantly going into a social impact business, right? To ensure that people are not going to migrate because they need employment. So this is a very important, and I mean, you have to open doors where there is the balance, of prevention activities. We need to relook how these things can be replicated, further replicated and strengthened. I mean, for us, I would just say where I'm sitting right now, Sunita, is somewhere in Assam halfway, where the flood has devastated many of the population in Assam this year, where people are losing all the employment and, and livelihood. We are co-creating. I mean, I'm opening up co-creation with an organization like Balipara Foundation, working, with an innovation called Rural Futures, of creating, livelihood in agriculture, agroforestry, and environment, because that is where indigenous population live. So we need to open doors, we cannot rigid prevention just from our lens. So I think these are the three topmost one that I would say is very, very critical and important.
Thank you, Hasina. You very, very critically spoke about re-trafficking, preventing through prevention of re-trafficking, building the capacities of the community, building our own capacities with skills, building capacity as a whole, preparedness to fight trafficking, and economic sustainability. Ravi, what do you think in the space of protection? What are the three important things that we need to build right now to remedy all the loopholes that we are going through in terms of rescue and rehabilitation?
Yes, my take is that whatever we do, we should bring government at the center stage. All of us need to activate our advisory committees at the state level. We have to bring them. The government has to be part of all these deliberations. The government has to understand these issues, and many a time, because they remain aloof and we remain aloof, the dialogues don't happen. So one of the most important things which we need to do is to bring government center stage, activate the mechanisms, activate the infrastructure, legal infrastructure, which is provided in the Immoral Traffic Prevention Act, in the JJ Act. All these committees and advisory bodies need to be activated. Until and unless they don't get activated, the responses will be very less. In terms of once the government becomes center stage and governments become parts of all these discussions, prevention activity, one or two NGOs cannot do it. Until and unless it is built within the government agencies, systems, the panchayats. So that is why my only suggestion is that government has to come in. Once government comes in, once a proactive DM comes in, one SPs and police agencies comes in, we'll have a good response. Prevention can only happen when state government takes active interest into it. We have seen this in Swam Siddha initiative in West Bengal, where state chief minister has taken a personal interest into it, and every SP is doing Swam Siddha initiatives in West Bengal. So bring government center stage. Government is the biggest stakeholder in the fight against human trafficking, and they have to do it. All the law enforcement agencies have to be trained and sensitized that they are also a big stakeholder. So whatever we do, whatever fights we have, whatever uh, egos we have, whatever, it's all part of being human, you know. But certainly when we are talking about support to victims of human trafficking, we have to come together and bring the government on board.
Ravi, you've raised a very pertinent point. We, as civil society organization, becoming a very powerful pressure group to activate what is already there in our statutes, activate the policies which are there on paper, just not even getting anything new, but getting, activated everything will become such a big game changer in the rescue space and in the rehabilitation space. Vineet, what about you? Cyber trafficking, prosecution in cyber trafficking, conviction in cyber trafficking is absolutely minimal. What is the kind of solutions that you think and you can suggest three solutions to increase prosecution in cyber trafficking cases, and how can we as a civil society organization take those solutions?
Sunita ji, all my points have already been spoken by the other speakers, but still I'll add a few. In fact, and I'll go with the first point, which is networking. And networking here, it's not civil society. I feel we should get industry on board. We should get academia on board. The university should also come on board. Plus, government should be one of the collaborators. So it should be like we all are collaborating to solve a problem which is there currently. So I would feel if we are able to develop that kind of a platform here, I think things would be much faster. The response would be much quicker. The second one, which I highlighted, again, there is a gap, though a lot is being done. I would say it is being done by the government. It is also being done by NGOs like Prajwala and many other social entities. But still, I feel awareness, prevention, and also capacity building among the law enforcement agencies. Like I had already said, that people on the ground, they don't know what is there, how do you report, and what kind of resource. They don't know that they are being trafficked. When you talk about cyberspace, they might not be even aware. They might be befriending with somebody on Facebook and going into that trap, but they might not be aware, okay, this is how it happens. So that's why awareness is one such thing which should be focused. A lot of steps should be taken on the prevention. And the third point is, again, quick response and relief. This is what, in fact, I would say, if we are able to do something together like this, I think this would be something that every victim is looking forward. In fact, platforms, I feel, are not doing much. And platforms here, I would mean the tech platforms. All the tech platforms, I will not name one. I would say it's across. In fact, they might claim that they have different teams which look forward issue. The response are pretty quick. In fact, they have artificial intelligence, they have machine learning and all that. In fact, photo DNAs and all that. But still, on the ground, I feel interaction with the victims, not much is happening here. So just in case, if the victim is not getting that relief, if the victim, again, goes, for example, if the victim is aware enough to go and report on the platform, still he's not getting the relief, we should stand up as civil society organizations. We should stand up, we should actually build a kind of a pressure group, again, raise this issue and somehow get the issue sorted. So these are some quick points from my side.
Thank you. Fascinating conversation. Did you all realize that we have been at it for almost an hour, past an hour actually, and we did not realize that. And I think, we have asked enough questions, both Sunita and I. It is now time to go back to a very attentive audience that has posed lots of questions. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick some questions and pose it to each one of you. Things I feel have not really been addressed, and probably in responses to some comments that you made. So Hasina, I'll ask you this first question. It's pretty straightforward. You mentioned that there are, the funding is dwindling. There are a lot of people, and the pie is constantly shrinking. So we have to look at other funding sources. CSR is constantly something that is thrown out as a solution to every single problem in this country. Do you think CSR can be a source of fund to tap for anti-trafficking efforts?
Yes, very true. I mean, CSR, as per the law, 2% of company CSR is mandatory into social action. but we have seen that the social action, at least pre-COVID, it has always been event-based, Sahil, you know, where sometimes the money just get over in 2 days when that money could be something very valuable to the anti-trafficking space, even whether it's shelter, whether it's rehabilitation, whether it's prevention. I mean, the three major points that we already have right now could be addressed by CSR money. But CSR has never looked at engaging anti-trafficking organization, taking the mandate of the country in terms of responding, because we all know that the CSR 2% is mandatory, but if they just waste the money 2% in events after events, the real work on anti-trafficking just get dismissed. So it's very important that we need to bring them on board. And I think what Sunita has mentioned about, you know, reactivating all these, you know, committees that the government has set on the anti-trafficking, it's time that these committee bring the CSR, you know, to have a dialogue, to understand that the 2% should also be, you know, taken into account, that the anti-trafficking initiative in the country at various levels that all of us have spoken should be contributed, work together, rather than wasting money into events.
Thank you. Yes, I mean, probably there could be a law, and maybe it will go back to a lot of you to how to create the pressure group that can make. I know companies hate this when they're asked to pay their CSR 2%, but if there could be a law that a certain percentage within the 2% is actually directed towards anti-trafficking. Vineet, you have a point.
Yes, a quick point from my side. My experience of, again, working with a company on a CSR project, what I felt was the companies are mostly interested to actually work in a particular area where they are facing a problem, and on a particular issue where they are getting that negative kind of a feedback from the general public, rather than focusing on the core issue. So this also has been one of the experience that I thought I should share, which should not have been a problem. Like for us, it's something like any particular issue that needs attention should be something that the CSR fund should be addressed to, rather than, I mean, the same fund being utilized for, I mean, uplifting the image of the company in that particular region. So there are certain issues. I thought I'll flag this one too.
Sure. No, very useful points. Very useful points, Vineet. I think, Raviji, I will ask you, you know, this next question has come from Mr. Shiva Gaundan. What is the best way to undertake a comprehensive research on the need for a collaborative approach to address human trafficking, which may also serve as a repository of best practices going beyond what is the donor-driven personal agenda? So, you know, it is research that is taken by your organizations collaboratively, identifying the issues that are there, and it is not the donor-driven agenda that is making you do projects.
Again, a difficult question. And certainly, I think that since we know the issues, especially there are a lot of organizations who have been working on these issues for the last 2 decades. And we can count them, and they are all good friends, and we work together. A group of organizations can come together, and they can come. And you know, the best part is that the government of India has a lot of funding on research. We don't tap them actually. But if we as a group approach the government will be certainly happy to support us. I'm aware of, because a lot of money goes on research, which is just, you know, cut, copy, paste, which happens, and that's the end of it. So government has the funds. We as a group can come together and tell the government that we are wanting to do this research, and we can come and do it collaboratively. If we can do it collaboratively, I think that can produce big results. We know the gaps. We know where are the issues, what are the shortfalls, what are the strong points. We know that. And therefore, when we can come together, we can propose to the government that can bring in good result. So one of the takes from today's discussion, which I will be very interested in and would be looking towards Prajwala's leadership in terms of these issues is that can we have a collaborative research together so that we can really bring out these points, and with the support of the government. We have to bring the government with us.
Thank you, Raviji. I think, we had, as you can see above me is End Human Trafficking series. We were hoping to bring solutions out. I think you've already offered one here from a question from one of our audiences. So Sunita, now the ball is in your court to ask, and see that such collaborative research could be set up. But before we end, I would definitely like to take one more audience question. I'll come to you, Vineet. So because of COVID, a lot of families have actually been affected. Of course, because of the disease itself, of the pandemic itself, but it has also given rise to increased cases of human trafficking, especially. So, if you could, very briefly highlight within your area of specialty, how has COVID actually led to a spurt in cases? If you go a little bit into a detail of that.
Yes, in fact, because people are at home and so are the criminals. So best way they could do is by staying anonymous is to target the victims again. And there are many first-time users. For example, let me also give you a scenario. And this is one statement that I make a mention in all my talks, is that India is going to reach 1 billion connected users this year, 2020. And majority of the users are going to come from tier 3 cities or villages or smaller towns in India. And that I see as a challenge, because these are all first-time users who don't understand that there could be something wrong. There are people sitting behind who can actually friend you, may appear as a youth, but can be somebody very elderly chap who is basically a trafficker, and he might reach out to you. It's not, I would not say a particular gender. It could be any gender, could reach out to you, and then we could actually let you fall in a trap. So there are issues, and this is one reason why the cases are increasing, because people don't realize the problem. In fact, they're not aware of the problems. Slowly and slowly, in fact, tier 1 cities, they are slightly made aware, but still the only response that they have at this moment is the Ministry of Home Affairs website, cybercrime.gov.in, which is under NCRB. So likewise, like I mentioned earlier also, so we need more such platforms and response mechanism, because this case is going to grow up. And again, like this is the new norm, same way the criminals are also adapting the entire online culture, online mechanism, because they realize this is much easy. It's very easy to communicate. It's very easy to build networks. Cyberspace offers you that anonymity. And also, it also actually gives you the opportunity to reach out to anyone at any corner of the country. So that's some advantage which the criminals are also misusing, and so the crimes are increasing. In fact, the trafficking and other incidents, the cases of child sexual abuse materials are on the increase.
Thank you, Vineet. So I know there are more questions but we will be sitting here till midnight, and I will have to offer you some Hyderabadi biryani, which I cannot online. But so I will just leave you with one final thought. It's a question, but I will turn that into a comment. Most of you have already addressed it, but would it help to form an alliance or an umbrella of anti-tip organizations which can give anti-human trafficking efforts, the cause, a huge bargaining power, which would also help the government to relate to one single organization, and it could also serve as a way to prevent donor-driven agendas from driving trafficking activities? I will not pose that as a question, because we are almost at the end of the time that we had given, 90 minutes for this entire exercise. So Sunita, it's over to you for your final comments. Can you unmute yourself, Sunita?
Salil, what you just said is, how do we start working with our huge egos and keep it aside and find a common ground to work together? New, old, everybody. It is not a monopoly market. So what we have done in the last hour and a half, and actually we're close to completing an hour and a half. We started at 4:30. We are closer to 6 o'clock now. In 3 minutes time, we will be at 6. What we have done is try to understand what are the trends that are bothering us. What are the uncomfortable trends that each one of us are seeing, whether it is newer NGOs coming with lack of skills, or new trends like cyber trafficking, which has now exploded in the COVID times. What are the new trends we are talking about? We also spoke about what has been our civil society response. Whether are we skilled enough for this? Are our capacity equipped enough for this? Are we really providing the adequate amount of support that we're looking at? And I want to mention this here, and I'm mention this very categorically. I don't think Hasina ever meant that newer organizations are not required. Definitely, what Hasina was saying is that newer organizations are required. There has to be fresh blood. There has to be new organizations coming in, but we don't need to be reinventing the wheel again and again. You don't need to be making the same mistakes that we made. So let's learn from each other. Let's create a collaborative way of working together, understanding what has been done and start from where to go next. We also spoke about resource and resource challenges, about donor driven agendas, about how needs are now sometimes sidelined with agendas of others. We spoke about collaboration versus competition. And Salil very sweetly said that in his question. I like that part, that whether are we competing to end the problem or are we competing to grab resources, which is a reality. It is something that is bothering all of us, but also I think very concretely we spoke about solutions that all of us have to come together and do. And one of the things that I would like to say today is that today what Vineet said stands true. 1 billion vulnerable human beings in India alone who could be trafficked, if not offline, at least online. We have a huge challenge. My biggest worry as a frontliner doing what I'm doing for the last 25 years is 25 years from now, I hope we will not be still discussing about what is human trafficking, what are the numbers that we are talking about, and millions of children and women get trafficked more. There is a time to do research, but there is also a time for us to act, and to act, we have to act now. Yes, we have to create a lot of awareness, but yes, we also need first responders coming today. We need people with determination and courage to come and fight, take by horns the traffickers, support the government, support the law enforcement in rescue work. We need organizations who are willing to take the liabilities of running protection work so that there is no re-trafficking anymore. We need a lot more players to come. But most importantly, we need to come together as one collective force. Today, we are very fragmented. Our voices are fragmented. Our responses are fragmented. All of us mean well. If we have one agenda that to end trafficking, like Ravi rightly pointed out, yes, I think there was some hope. We're coming closer to our end. I want to quickly thank all our panelists, Hasina, Ravi, and Captain Vineet, for giving your time, giving your honesty. I also thank you as a person for your commitment, determination, and perseverance. I think I've seen you all see the worst of humanity. I've seen you all still maintain hope in all the adversity. Thank you so much on behalf of all of us.
Sunita madam, I am Sivaram Judge. Can I say one thing lastly?
Yeah, please.
Yeah, madam, I want to share the newly coming this act. I think that you have heard about this Legal Services Act.
Yes, sir.
Legal Services Authority Act is there. Under certain provisions of the act, the victims are entitled for compensation.
Sir.
Hello?
Sir.
Can you hear me?
Sir, I think Ravi rightly said that all the government provisions, whether it is State Legal Services Authority or the NALSA scheme.
Legal Services Authority. Yeah, that is already covered. But I want to say that the court can award the compensation to the victim when there is proper application from the victim. Without there being any application from the victim, the court cannot sumoto grant the compensation.
Absolutely,
So
absolutely.
there is every need to enlighten the concerned public prosecutors of the entire country itself. You can take steps in that way also, so that
Yes,
the
sir.
victims will get benefit out of it.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much. I'm so
There,
grateful to what.
there is no need that the case should be ended in conviction of the accused. Registration of FIR is sufficient to grant the compensation to the victim.
Thank you so much, sir. That's a very useful point, and you actually
Yeah.
preempted what I have to say next, because this is a 6-week series. So while I thank my panelists, I want to thank all our friends on Zoom and Facebook who are watching this. I want to thank Swasti and Nitin who are working behind the screen. But most importantly, I want to thank my co-moderator, Salil. Salil Kadir is also our partnership, is also an indication of two huge democracies who believe that this problem should end. Salil and I actually signify a partnership between two different organizations, the US Consulate of Hyderabad and Prajwala Voluntary Organization, which means that there is a lot of hope. We are fighting a global problem. But I also want to tell all the audience here that this is a 6-week series. And thank you, Shivram Garu, because you have started that point for me, because the next in the series next week is our own Justice Madandi Loko, who will be who will be talking to us candidly about where the criminal justice system is failing.
Okay.
What are the things that is to be done? Why are the judges not awarding compensation? Why are the applications not being made? Why is it that 1956 ITPA is still not fully implemented? These and several other questions is what Justice Madan B. Lokur will be dealing with next week. So I request all of you all to join us next week also.
Okay.
And for the next 6 weeks, because this is a series. This is the first part of the series is with civil society organization, and the next week we have Justice Madan B. Lokur, and the week after that we have a super cop joining us. Thank you so much. It has been such a pleasure to have all of you all. Thank you, panelists, and thank you, Salil, for being my co-moderator. Thank you so much. Namaskar. I think together we will end
Thank you all.
modern days.
Namaskar.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.